everybody. Raul here with Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist, vocalist, and author of Making Music for Life, Gayla Mills.
Hi, great to be here.
So, starting from the beginning, Gayla, we'll take a little step back as we do with everybody. Tell us a little bit how you got started in music and on bass.
Sure. So I had kind of a typical background in learning guitar through the public school system, playing around with my friends as a teenager, doing a little bit there. I was actually a Sunday school music teacher for, very part-time, and so I would just use my guitar as an accompaniment, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I took guitar lessons, as a teenager and enjoyed those, but I never really got good on lead, and the guitar was kind of a struggle for me. And then about age 20, I'm not sure how I stumbled upon the bass, but I just started playing it and I just loved it. And of course, it's a pretty easy transition if you've been playing guitar to move to the bass. And so, I happened to have a friend who had a nice upright, and I was able to buy it from him cheap, and that was sweet. And so I was taking lessons and just really enjoying it. I did end up having to get rid of it after a year or so, just because I sold my car and I had no way to transport it. And it was one of those things, like I look back on it now and it was just this great bass, and it was just a shame. I had no idea at the time what I was doing, And then I ended up coming back to it in my 40s, and during the interim I was playing guitar.
I think probably one of the biggest challenges, because many of us will gravitate between string instruments.
Sure.
At least. And probably the biggest challenge is not thinking like a guitar player when you're playing bass.
Right. I didn't find that really to be a problem. The bass always felt really good to me, and it just felt more like part of my body in a way that the guitar didn't.
Kind of where I go is when my teacher used to talk to me as a guitar player, you spend time trying to fill the space in the song because you're backing up the melody, you're doing a whole bunch of stuff. As a bassist, you want to leave that strategic space between the notes where you're accentuating, kind of working that combination between the percussive and the melodic. You're not trying to necessarily fill in all the gaps in between. And especially if you're a rhythm guitar player, you're kind of constantly strumming and making a whole platform for the song to live on. Obviously, if you're a lead player, then you're noodling all over the place. So that was one of the things that my teacher was going, you're noodling too much. You're trying to put too many, why are you doing all these runs?
Right.
Do the groove, lay down the line. This only needs this part. Keep it simple. And so that's kind of where I go with that. So moving along, as you got back to bass a little later in life, you were motivated to write a book that deals with that very same kind of theme, and that is kind of re-entering into the world of learning music and the benefits of such.
What really happened was in my 40s, I started playing again. The whole motivation was that I wanted to be able to accompany my husband, Gene. He had written a lot of great songs. He was a good guitar player, and I wanted to see those recorded. I was a real amateur musician and wanted to find where I could fit in that. And musically, having a bass backing up an acoustic guitar, even if it's a real good guitar player, there is a lot of space there that needs to be filled with something, right? And so that was the issue for us. So just learning what I wanted to be doing on bass, what I wanted to be doing vocally, took time. And in the meantime, we're gigging and we're doing all these things. It was just an enormous pleasure to just be able to learn so many things at that stage of my life while I was also teaching and doing other things. And in the course of that 15 years of going to camps, doing gigging, learning more, I just discovered so many people who were in a similar situation where they had come back to music and were just getting a lot of pleasure from it. There were huge gaps in their information. Like some knew how to jam, but they had no idea that you could just go to a music camp and enjoy a week, with other adults and just have basically summer camp, which is a real blast. And those people weren't really that sure about jamming. And then there are lots of people who have no idea even how to form a band. They're playing at home alone, and that's fine to start with, but really the secret to staying with music and staying motivated is being able to do it with other people. So, when you're a kid, it's not that hard to find other people to play with. But when you've got a family or you have a job, where are you going to find people? It's really kind of not clear. So I've got things about that in my book. A lot of things are just focused on playing with other people. And how do you do that? And how do you get fun from it? So.
Absolutely. Well, and I agree. I think that we take it for granted when you're in a school setting. You're surrounded by so many other people your age, and the ones that have interest in music seem to kind of clump together, and making bands is
That's
kind
right.
of an easy thing. If you actually pursue music and you go into one of the formalized programs, now you're exposed to other musicians because they're in the program, and you get some amazing groups that come from that, whether they go to Berkeley, whether they go to Musicians Institute, whether they go to the New School of Jazz. They're exposed to so many other players that they can say, hey, let's get together and let's do this project, or let's get together, let's do this project. And then you get out into the workforce, and it goes back onto the back burner where, yeah, you might play, but you're busy doing so much of this everyday stuff that
Right.
nobody knows. And who has time for that? Also, you start adding family and all your commitments. And so I was thrilled to see some of the suggestions that would make it so you're not, again, who would think to go to a camp? You go, oh, that's for kids. We sent our son to a summer music camp, but I wouldn't have put myself in it.
Right. Yeah, and I think that a key element to this, and I talk about this quite a bit in the book, is really a change in attitude. And so music becomes, besides a wonderful thing in itself, it becomes a tool for you to use to age better. Because one of the things that happens when you're young, for example, say you are, a really promising, good musician, and you're going to one of these music schools. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people in this situation where their expectations are basically they're aiming for the heights. They're aiming for perfection. Their teachers are trying to get them to play the very best they can be. And that's what the goal is to become the best, to become successful. And, just like in your life, as you get older, you realize, most people just aren't going to do that. There's a huge element of luck. There are all kinds of other factors that come in. You don't know if you're going to have an accident. There are just so many things that can happen to you. And so how do you still get pleasure and joy from life? And one way to do that is to reevaluate what it is that you're doing with music, and to realize that one of the great joys of it is just being able to share it with other people, and that it no longer becomes, does this group sound fabulous, or is this group gonna make a recording and get a Grammy? That's not happening, And so what can you get from it? And reorienting yourself in that way and just taking a new approach, I think I've just seen so many people do it. The ones who do it successfully are really happy, And so what are we doing this for? So that's my attitude.
And I think another big part of this, and there's continuously you're seeing more and more studies that are suggesting that as we tend to live longer, longevity is increasing, that there are life practices that will help enable us to continue to be functional. And again, it's as use it or lose it, kind of the rule in nature. If you are continuously learning things, then your system to be able to learn things keeps working. If you don't try to learn anything new, then it goes, well, I don't have to, I don't have to fund this program, so I'm just going to kind of let that go.
Right.
And so whether it be learning languages, they've been talking that they see a great decrease in Alzheimer's in people that can speak multiple languages. I like to think of music as a language in some ways. I mean, we've had some in-depth conversations with other bass players that might argue that it's not exactly a language, but they can see it. We can kind of go back and forth on that whole point. But again, there are some similarities of learning the phrases and the patterns and kind of storing in your head, and not to mention just hand-eye coordination. You talk about arthritis. I mean, you've got to be using your hands, because if you're not, then they don't work as well anymore. So there's all kinds of mental and physical benefits that can come from music as a long-term process.
Absolutely. And I'm no scientist, but I have read a bunch of research papers by neuroscientists and audiologists and psychologists, in the process of writing this book. And what they all seem to agree with is that music is unique in terms of what it's doing to your brain. When they put someone in a machine, in a CAT scan, and they look at the brain while they're imagining playing music, the entire brain lights up, and there's nothing else that does that. And so they're just saying this is absolutely the best way that you can exercise your brain, much more effective than anything else. And so even if you're doing it in a different way as you get older, you're just going to be stimulating it, and that's a great thing. Absolutely.
Well, and I am convinced that music has effect at some of our most primitive levels as well. And I think that is part of where we feel emotions and things that come, and it's not necessarily on lyrics. I, for one, am terrible with lyrics. As a matter of fact, it's been kind of funny because I've heard songs that I'd heard decades ago, but I finally stopped and listened to the lyrics. I'm going, oh, that's what they were saying.
Right.
I never realized that. And so, but I know how the song made me feel.
Right.
And so it was hitting at a more subconscious level that when you heard it, you go, oh, it's a happy Saturday song, or it's my rainy day blue, I'm sad song, or whatever. And even to that point, in my undergrad years, I actually did research into the musical preferences of goldfish, which didn't really turn out the way I expected. But I digress. Let's go back to basses. Tell us a little bit, because I see you're upright. I would be remiss if I didn't ask. Tell us a little bit about your sound. How are you getting your sound?
Sure. So I'm really trying to get as close to an acoustic sound as I can, which means in terms of how I'm hooking it up. When I go to a gig, I always feel kind of bad about having to plug into a system. I don't mic it generally, although I think that would be a good thing to do. I do have a plug-in. I have a Realist pickup, and that works real well. But in an ideal world, whenever I can play unamplified, that's my preference. I am exploring right now getting a U-bass, just because I would like to have something that's portable as a backup. And so I'm actually going out after this interview to our local uke store, which is a wonderful store, and I'm going to check out their U-basses for the third time and maybe actually settle on one. I had a hollow-bodied bass a good while back. Again, I liked that because you could play acoustically in a room, if it was just a few people. Personally, I just love the feel when you're standing up and you've got a bass against you. And so an electric has never quite done that for me. But I admire electric players. Just the feeling of having this really large instrument up against you, and it's sending that enormous box of sound against your body. There's just nothing quite like that. So.
Oh, I agree. Real quick sidebar on the U-basses. What is really amazing is that I do feel that you get very close to an upright sound.
Absolutely.
From such a very small instrument.
Yeah, I don't know how they do that, but I've explored various options, and that's become the most appealing because it's sort of halfway between an electric and an upright in terms of its sound. And really, it's just a little guy, and I don't
Yeah.
know how they do that.
And the travel options are great. We as we've mentioned so many times that upright players that have had to lug instruments
Yes.
around. Currently, our cover interview, Reggie Workman, back in the day, had bought his first bass from a pawn shop in New York City for $125, but it didn't come with a case, and so he's lugging this thing all over New York City.
I can't imagine.
With no case whatsoever. You just got to go. Yeah, it's kind of a love or hate. A lot of times, it's difficult for bass players also to go back and forth between electric and upright. There are a few that do it really well, and Patitucci, Avishai Cohen, Brian Bromberg can play upright amazingly. But I find that most of us will gravitate kind of towards one or the other because of what you're describing, that feeling.
Sure.
It's just not the same, and they enjoy, the way their particular instrument resonates with them. So
Sure.
looking forward, what plans do you have? Because I know you're continuously playing, and we'll share some of the music. I know that you and your husband are playing. I find you guys are kind of in the realm of what I would call maybe Americana, because it's not necessarily bluegrass.
Sure. I guess I'd call it roots or acoustic Americana.
Okay.
I think for a lot of people, they're going to associate Americana with again, more electric instruments. And so it depends on what their associations are, but we certainly fit in the roots category, which will include that whole mix of blues and bluegrass and country and different types of folk music.
Gotcha.
All kind of getting melded together, and that's what we're doing. Yeah, and most of the people that we're playing with or we're jamming, it's all acoustic. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So any future plans, recordings, more books?
Well, we're working on CD4. We've taken it slow, recording one song at a time when we can kind of work it in the schedule. And so that might be, who knows, maybe a year from now before that album comes out. It also makes it a little easier to finance because we're just paying for it one song at a time with the studio time.
Gotcha.
And on those CDs generally get maybe half of our other instrumentalists. They'll come into the studio with us, or sometimes they'll be sending us tracks from another place. These are all friends of ours that we just love having that relationship with, and it's a way to share something with them as well. No plans with another book. I've got still plenty on my plate to do with this one, and I'm going to be doing lots of workshops and other events, and that'll stretch into the next year or so for me. So hoping to do things with the book, with music camps next summer and other things. So
nice. And if people want to know more about what you're doing for the book, for your writing part, it's GaylaMills.com.
That's right. That's probably the most informative place to go. You can hop off from there to other sites for whatever you're looking for, but that's a good place to start.
And for the music, it's GeneandGayla.com.
That's right. Or you can make it Gene and Gayla Mills. Either way will get you there.
Gotcha. Well, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and certainly I'm very grateful that you took the time to put down all of these great tips and great details. Folks, making music for life, if you have, like a lot of us, spent a whole lifetime in another career, or you used to be in music and you want to get back to it, you're not sure how, this is a great resource. Or if you know somebody that you think would benefit by getting back into music, and it doesn't have to be bass. It is very universal, so it applies to most anybody.
Thank you so much, Raul. It was a real pleasure talking to you, and enjoy your bass journey.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure, Gayla. You've seen her here, Gayla Mills, on Bass Musician Magazine.